simpler mobility solutions would be in demand, and that would of course depend upon the regulation and the infrastructure within the various countries, but the developed countries would be very quick to pick this up. The future of mobility in the underdeveloped and the emerging economies, and there are a lot of them, over 150 countries in this world are emerging markets, and the infrastructure quality is not such high there. That will totally depend upon how the policy pans out, what kind of regulations government has. And we go live. Let's talk about the future of mobility. Over the last 10 years, from the year 2010, when the Uber kind of model started emerging, till the year 2020, it was all about shared economy. When I say shared economy, it was like, how can one taxi provide transportation solutions to multiple number of people? And this is the reason why multiple platforms like Uber, Didi Chuk Singh, Yandex Taxi, Ola, Grab, Gojek around the world emerged, and they became successful. The consumer adoption was high because there was the need for mobility. But from the period of 2020 till 2030, there is going to be a lot of action in the mobility space. I think over the next 5 years, as the world comes out of the pandemic situation, there would be requirement for the micro mobility solutions. How can people travel from one point to another point without involving the heavy vehicles like a car or a bike? So simpler mobility solutions would be in demand, and that would of course depend upon the regulation and the infrastructure within the various countries, but the developed countries would be very quick to pick this up. The future of mobility in the underdeveloped and the emerging economies, and there are a lot of them, over 150 countries in this world are emerging markets, and the infrastructure quality is not high there. That will totally depend upon how the policy pans out, what kind of regulations government has, because in a lot of emerging markets, the people who provide the mobility services are the people that who could not get income opportunities or job opportunities in the regular corporate sector. As a result, they are heavily dependent on the mobility and the current services that they are providing within the mobility space. So I think the developed countries would be very quick to pick up the micro mobility solutions, which are the solutions ranging from 1 mile to 2 miles, and how can consumers own certain micro mobility devices which are safe to use, that are safe for the passengers. And of course, the countries should have infrastructure where these micro mobility solutions can be used, and they can be in the form of ownership or even shared solutions. By the year 2025, we will see the electrification of the cars. In the post-pandemic world, the future is clearly green. There is a huge expectation from the companies, including the automobile companies, to go electric to reduce their carbon footprint. And as a matter of fact, most of the governments around the world are bringing in the regulations that can solve for the carbon footprint goals that these companies and the countries have. So we will see extensive electrification of the cars, with Tesla leading the way, which is way ahead of all its competitors by a matter of 5 to 7 years when it comes to technologies and building up prototypes. But another interesting case that we will see is that we will see the electrification of not just the cars, but also the heavy commercial vehicles and the trucks. That will happen over the next 5 years. The adoption will again take time because the electric vehicles are dependent on the enabling infrastructure related to the electric charging points that need to come up in order to solve for this problem. And just like in the case of micromobility, the adoption would be higher in the developed countries compared to the countries that lack the basic infrastructure and the electric charging stations. The private sector will have to take the responsibility to build up that infrastructure in partnership with the government. As the IoT and the 5G deployment happens around the world by the year 2025, we will see the emergence of connected vehicles. And the connectivity of vehicles would be basically of two kinds, which is V2V, which is vehicle to vehicle, and V2I, which is vehicle to infrastructure. And then, of course, there are other solutions, other kinds of connectivity that exist within the smart city paradigm. But this is going to happen. This is the future. Your car is going to be the biggest gadget that you can own. Right now, it's the mobile phone, but after a period of time, your car is going to be the coolest data generating gadget, which will give all the data that you need for the purpose of ensuring that your mobility requirements are met. The data would also be shared with your insurance partners to bring out more personalized services for you, for the owners of the car, and with the government to ensure that the regulations are met. And the last bit is that by the year 2030, we will see the autonomous tests that have been so successful around the world come into full deployment. We will see the autonomous cars which are operating perhaps at the level 5 autonomy, and there would be cheaper technologies. Right now, they are heavily dependent on the LiDAR technology, but then by the year 2030, as the controlled data tests mature, as more and more data sets related to the mobility are available, as the big tech companies of the world build up the map capabilities and the GPS capabilities, they will ensure that the cars that we have, they are much more autonomous. So if you have to look at from the big trends perspective, remember that by the year 2025, most of the cars will be electric and they will be connected, and by the year 2030 we will see a lot of autonomous cars across the developed markets and the emerging markets as well, depending upon the infrastructure and the policies of the government and how they want to evolve the employment structures within their regulations. We will also see in certain countries like Singapore and US, and even certain developed countries, we will see the electric air taxis which will be open to the public, and even newer forms of transport which would involve ocean transport. But that would happen by the year 2030, the full-fledged deployment of these solutions related to mobility. Travel would be much more convenient and easy, not just within the city,